Hello, I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports, and welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. I'm joined by Mike Barner, who's a contributing writer here at RealTime Fantasy Sports. Mike, thanks again for joining me on the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Mike, we're going to dig into some data that we like to pull here at RealTime Fantasy Sports. I think it kind of differentiates us from other sites where we can actually do these things that I don't think some of these huge sites can do. But we're going to look at draft position from last year and what it kind of means for this year and talk about the draft positions that won leagues. So we have all sorts of data that tells us who won their leagues, picking out of what spot. We also want to look at the most owned players. I always think that's interesting as well. So we'll look at the most owned players on championship teams as well. Then we're also going to dive into the quarterback position a little bit and what some of that data that we pulled means as well. And also, I don't want to forget, here's the big one, Mike. 2 giveaways today to the RT Sports Superflex Best Ball Championship contest. So we're going to do 2 giveaways. We're going to give away one here at the beginning of the show and also near the end. We have trivia questions, though. So you got to be on your game. You got to answer the trivia questions. And the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Superflex Best Ball Championship, just a great contest. We opened it up because our Best Ball Championship's about sold out. So that's been super popular. And we are going to do a Superflex one now. And this one gives away $100,000 to the grand prize winner. Also $100 in league prizes as well. It's just $20 to get in. You must be a legal U.S. resident, at least 18 years of age, and you can only win once every 30 days. So if you won in the past 30 days, please do not try to win this contest. Also, please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So, Mike, let's get into this contest first and let people try to answer the questions. So if you have any questions as well throughout the show, Mike and I are happy to answer them. So if you want to post something in the chat, if you have something you want to ask us about anything at all, feel free to do so. Or if you have any comments on what we're talking about too. But let's talk about this trivia question, Mike. I didn't tell you it yet, so don't spoil it if you know the answer, but I think it's a good one.
Okay.
So, who holds the single season record for fantasy tight end scoring in PPR formats? So if you know the answer to this, put it in the stream. Again, who holds the single season record for fantasy tight end scoring in PPR formats? All right, let's see if anybody can get this. If you get it, you will win again an entry into the Superflex Best Ball Championship. Okay, Mike, let's talk about this data now that I was talking about with the draft positions. Let's look at that one first. So, Ernie, if you could pull up the draft positions that won from last year on our site. So, if you look at the graphic there, so the first one, the third position was the overwhelming winner at 15.4% of winners had the third pick, the second pick at 13%, the fourth pick at 11.8%, fifth pick at 10.2%. Then you look all the way at the bottom. 12th pick was last at 4.6%, and then the first pick at 4.8%. So, Mike, when you look at that data, first of all, what's your first thoughts, your first takeaways?
Yeah, my first thought is that Jonathan Taylor killed a lot of fantasy teams. He was mostly the consensus number one overall pick in most leagues. So he was taken first, and he killed you. He had 18 touchdowns the year before. He had just 4 last year. He played just 11 games because of injuries. So if you took him and used the overall pick, you were behind the 8 ball right from the start.
Yep, for sure. That absolutely killed you. He was a consensus number one. And I told you this before we came on, though. There's usually not that big of a gap between the first and last place finisher. We've pulled this data before, but this is the biggest I've seen so far. So it really was an advantage to have a top 4 pick. And the reasons, the top 2 to 5 pick, I should say. And the reason is you can just look at the ADP from last year. It's after Jonathan Taylor, it was Justin Jefferson, Christian McCaffrey, Cooper Kupp, Austin Eckler. So Justin Jefferson had just a monster season. A lot of people got him with that third pick, so you can see why that was successful. Christian McCaffrey as well, and Austin Eckler, both big-time scorers. So not a huge surprise that those picks were successful. You agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, and also I think a lot of the reason why the bottom 3 were unsuccessful is a lot of those guys that were wrapping around in the beginning of the second round did not have good years either. You look at DeAndre Swift, his ADP was 12 last year. So whether you took him in the 11, 12, 13, 14 range, kind of there, you were stuck with a bad season. He got hurt again. Najee Harris, he wasn't that great either. He had an ADP of 15. Javonte Williams, his ADP was 16. He played 4 games before he tore his ACL. So those 10, 11, 12 teams are already in a tough spot because the top end talent is gone. And then when those guys that they were taking at the beginning of the second round where they should have the advantage, they all either got hurt or performed so poorly, that really put them in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Mike. I think you're right, though. I think on the way back, those owners got hurt as well because, like you said, like Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, even Debo Samuel was picked in that range too. So if you took Mixon or Swift, he was around that point with your first pick. Then you came back and got Javonte Williams or Debo Samuel. Man, you were in a world of hurt, and you can see why.
It's over.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always interesting to see how that plays out for sure. So also, just looking at like the top picks too that were successful, most of them were not really, or I should say, the top picks that were successful. Were not really huge question marks coming into the season. I know you always have injury issues with Eckler and McCaffrey, but some of these guys just they panned out and they worked for fantasy owners. And a lot of people like to go away from running backs, but Eckler and Christian McCaffrey proved that you can still go running back early and win for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and those guys, the big difference there is they're such big pass catchers, and Eckler was the touchdown machine too. So, and McCaffrey was mostly healthy at the end of the season, when teams were going through their playoffs and stuff. So, yeah, those guys were definitely, if you avoided the Jonathan Taylor landmine, you were usually in good shape being in the first half of that first round.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I want to throw out the question again for everybody if you're just joining the stream. So we're giving away a Superflex Best Ball Championship entry this year for today. It's a chance to compete for a big prize and $100 in league prizes. It's valued at $20. You must be a legal U.S. resident, at least 18 years of age. You can only win once every 30 days, and please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And the question is, first person to get this gets an entry in the contest. Who holds the single season record for fantasy tight end scoring in PPR formats? So that's the question. Who holds the single season record for fantasy tight end in PPR formats? Mike, do you think you know it?
Well, I can tell you one guy who it isn't. It's probably not Howard Cross or somebody like that. I'll throw out some obscure names because I don't want to tilt the scales here. So we'll just throw out some. Probably not
Mark
Donald
Bavaro?
Parham. Yeah,
Yeah,
probably
there you
not any
go.
of those guys. No Donald Parham. Probably not him either. So I'll
Yeah.
help you rule out some guys, but I won't give you the answer.
Okay. Let's look at the most owned players now from last year. I think that's always interesting as well. So if you could bring up that graphic. And Justin Jefferson was the overwhelming most owned player. Again, not a surprise. He had a monster season last year, one of the best in the history of fantasy football. He was owned on 16.6% of championship teams. Then you have Travis Kelce, Austin Eckler, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Josh Jacobs, TJ Hawkinson, Tony Pollard, and Devonta Smith. Those are the top 10. We have 30 up there, though, and you can see them all. First impressions when you see this, Mike?
Yeah, Jalen Hurts helped a lot of people. He was
Yeah.
on the fourth one there because his ADP was 47. So he's essentially going the last couple picks there in the fourth round. So those fantasy managers were able to build a good foundation, likely at running back and wide receiver. And then to get Hurts that late with his rushing and touchdowns, that was a huge winner there. And then, like you said, there's a lot of safe guys. Justin Jefferson, safe guy. Travis Kelce, safe guy. Austin Eckler, same thing. Tyreek Hill, he's a safe guy. So there was a lot of those guys were, first couple round picks that gave you that very high floor. And, one outlier that did stand out to me was TJ Hawkinson. He didn't exactly have the best year on a week-to-week basis, but probably the reason why he's on this list is that monster performance that he had in week 16 against the Giants. He had 13 catches, 109 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that, if you had him during your fantasy playoffs there, that was big. And then another guy that kind of stood out was Josh Jacobs, his ADP of 55. I don't think anyone saw the season coming from him that he delivered. So getting him there at around pick 55 was another big win for fantasy managers.
Yeah, I like to look at the ADP from last year and see what guys were really good values, and Jacobs was one of them that I actually thought he could challenge Jefferson and be first overall, just because, like you said, his ADP was 55, and he had just a huge season. TJ Hawkinson, another guy who's good value though, his ADP was 88 last year, and then Tony Pollard right after him was 92, and the only one, if you can believe this, the only ADP 100 plus on the entire list from last year's Tyler Lockett. So he was 19th overall, owned on 10.9% of championship teams. He had a good year. He was a lot more consistent than normal. So uh, that's usually why his ADP is a little lower. People don't like his inconsistency, but he had a really good season. So he was the only one that had an ADP over 100. Anything else you want to talk about on this list at all, Mike?
I think you'll probably see a lot of the guys on this list there again this year. Obviously, other than the
Yep.
big names of Jefferson and Kelsey and stuff like that. But Tony Pollard, he was ninth on this list. He's looking to have a big season now as the lead guy for the Cowboys. There's a lot of quarterbacks on this list, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about later. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those same quarterbacks are on this list too. On a lot of tight ends, we see George Kittle here at number 21. 10.4%. His ADP was 60. He's a guy that I'm avoiding this year. So we'll see if he ends up on that list.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too because a couple guys, Kittle and Henry, both had injury issues last year. So them being on the list in the top 30 is a little surprising to me. Henry was huge when he was playing early in the year, but still, he was banged up at times. I like to see if there's any other people like that that stand out. I guess Damian Pierce a little bit too at 29. He was owned on 9.3% of teams. His ADP was 67 though, so he was good value, and he played really well at times. Again, it's a lot of consistency. You look at this list, and there's a lot of really consistent players on it that posted, those numbers on a weekly basis that help you win a fantasy championship. You don't see a lot of guys that are up and down, and Kenneth Walker on the list too at 20. He's another guy, and Ramondre Stevenson, another player that had good value. So it kind of shows me that you need to find some values in the middle rounds because there's a lot of guys on this list that are picked in that 90 80 range as well. So we talked about it last week, Mike, finding those values in the middle rounds, and I think this list kind of shows that you want to kind of target some of those players that you think can hit big.
Yeah, definitely. And just a couple other guys to highlight on this list. We talked about him last week. Kirk Cousins, he
Yep.
was on this list at 9.5%. So if you do miss out on those top tier quarterbacks, this just goes to show you can take a guy like Cousins late. He's available even later this year, which we'll talk about too in a little bit. But you can still get a guy that late and be successful at the position.
And we still don't have a winner yet on our trivia question. I think it's one that people can get. Again, who holds the single season record for fantasy tight end PPR scoring in a single season? If you know the answer, put it in the chat. You can win an entry into the Superflex Best Ball Championship. Compete for a grand prize of $100,000, $100 in league prizes in every league. The prize is valued at $20 as well. So if you want to get in this contest, answer that question, you can get in. It's a great contest. We opened it up because our regular best ball championship is going to sell out. It's nearly sold out right now. So we wanted to give people an opportunity to do another one. And we thought we'd change up a little bit and do the Superflex format. I know you talked about you're in a Superflex league coming up too, Mike. They're a lot of fun. It's a different format, but it's a fun format, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And let's just try and help people here. Let's rule out a couple more tight ends. I think
Okay.
probably Tyler Conklin would not be a good guess. We can probably take him out of there. Maybe Mo Alley Cox. We could probably
Willie
take him
Cox,
out of there too.
gone.
So
Yep,
let's narrow down this field and help make things a little easier on
I
people.
agree. Taysom Hill too. Let's say Taysom Hill. He's not in it. I
Yup.
know a lot of people are upset that he gets that tight end eligibility, but he did not break the scoring record last year, so he is not in it as well. Again, who holds a single season record for fantasy tight end scoring in PPR formats? That's our trivia question to get in the Superflex Best Ball Championship. Okay, Mike, let's talk about, we teased it a little bit. Let's talk about this QB data now. So I thought it was really interesting if we could pull that graphic up. we had 5 players on the most owned list, 5 quarterbacks on the most owned list, and their ranking. So the first one was Jalen Hurts, then Patrick Mahomes, then Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins. But if you look at their QB ranking for the season, Jalen Hurts was third, Patrick Mahomes first, Joe Burrow fourth, Josh Allen second, Kirk Cousins sixth. So it tells me that if you had one of the top 6 quarterbacks last year, fifth is not on this most owned list, but if you had a top 6, most likely you had a pretty good season because a lot of people won their leagues according to this most owned list with one of these elite quarterbacks. So, are you going earlier on a quarterback because of this now, Mike? What do you think?
Yeah, one thing here, I'm going to guess number 5 was probably Lamar Jackson. And the reason why he's not on this list is because he missed so much time at the end of the season. Um, have usually been one not to draft quarterbacks early. If you're going to do it this year, it's going to be at a premium, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it. So you talked about these guys on this list. Last year, Hurts had an ADP of 47. This year, 25. Mahomes last year, 26. This year, 19. Burrow's jumped from 59 to 42. Josh Allen's about the same, 20. And then Kirk Cousins, he's actually dropped. He was 88 last year. And he's 115 this year. So I thought that was a pretty big difference there. So if you want these top tier quarterbacks, people have noticed the big difference in the scoring output last year, and they've adjusted accordingly and are drafting them much higher.
Yep, I agree. It's a different landscape when it comes to QBs, and you're right though. Just with looking at the ADPs from this year to last year is interesting to me. But even like I look at last year, Patrick Mahomes, he was a premium. You had to use a second round pick on him most likely, and Josh Allen the same way, and people still won by doing that. And I think a lot of people are under the idea that you should wait on a QB and you can get better value if you wait on it, and you don't want to take one of these elite guys. You can get other positions, but I think last year showed you can win. Even if you want to use a premium draft pick on Mahomes or Allen, both of them were a lot of league winners. I mean, that's roughly 27% of league winners last year had Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen on their roster. I mean, that tells me a lot, right, Mike?
Yeah, definitely. I think here, the way I'm attacking it is this. If one of those guys falls to the third round, like Mahomes or Allen or Hurts, I'm okay with taking them. I don't feel comfortable taking them in the second round. Now, if you're in an industry league with other fantasy analysts, then they probably will fall to the third round, which I've been able to grab them in some. If you're in a home league with
Yep.
just your buddies that are, watching the Red Zone channel each week, you're not going to get Patrick Mahomes in the third round. So you need to know that now and be ready to spend a second round pick on Mahomes, Josh Allen, and probably even Jalen Hurts. That's okay, because if you're doing that and your buddies are probably all attacking the same strategy, all 3 of those guys might go in the second round. And then that pushes down some of the running backs and wide receivers that you might be looking at into the third. So it's just, you're doing your home league, know who you're drafting with, and who your buddies' favorite teams are. And then that'll also help you determine whether you need to go second or third round for one of those top tier quarterbacks.
I think it's definitely a great point, Mike, because you have to know your league, and everybody's in different leagues, different formats. I mean, you draft online a lot where you don't know any of these owners, and it kind of you kind of just got to go by ADP and gauge your picks on where people might go using that. But when you're in home leagues and you know these owners, you know these guys you're playing with or gals you're playing with, it's definitely can change the way you draft. So don't again, we've talked about this before. Don't fall in love with ADP. It's a good guide, but you have to know your league as well.
Yeah, so I think if you're not worrying about your buddies here and you're just looking at drafting the best team possible, I think if you can get Mahomes or Allen or Hurts in the third round, then go for it. If they're going in the second round, then I would prefer to wait until probably the fourth or fifth round and take that tier of Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, someone in that range. That way you've been able to load up on running backs and wide receivers early. And then you can still snag, which I consider to be the tier 2 quarterbacks in like the fourth round. And I think that helps with your team build a lot, especially say you grab Mark Andrews in the second or third round. So maybe you went wide receiver, tight end, running back, and you got a top one in each position. And then you fill your quarterback spot with Herbert or Fields, you've got a great foundation at all 4 spots.
I agree, Mike. That's a great point. We want to say too, we have a winner in our contest. So Jay Bird 5035, he won. Gronk was the tight end that had the biggest season ever for fantasy scoring and PPR formats. Let's talk about that season. 90 catches, 1,327 yards, 18 touchdowns. So I thought maybe it might be Kelsey when I looked at this, when I was doing it because of his recent seasons, but those 18 TDs put Gronk over the top for sure.
I thought for sure it was going to be Daniel Bellinger. I didn't throw it out there. I'm glad I
This
didn't. I would
year.
have looked like a buffoon. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Congratulations on the big one there. Yeah, Gronk. I mean, when Gronk was at his peak, he's Kelsey at his peak now. He's a league winner. Yeah, Gronk, great guess, and congrats on the win.
Yeah, we're going to do one more. We still have some time before the end of the show, so I want to give away one more as well. One more question. This one I think is a little easier, maybe not, but the second question to win an entry in the Superflex Best Ball Championship is, what defense led the NFL in sacks last season? And they did it by 15. I didn't realize there was that big of a gap. So if you know the answer to what defense led the NFL in sacks last season, put it in the chat. You can get a chance to win the entry in the Superflex Best Ball Championship here at RealTime Fantasy Sports. Just a great contest. It's just $20 to get in. And if you want to win this, you must be a legal U.S. resident, at least 18 years of age. You can only win once every 30 days. And please play responsibly. Call 1-800-GAMBLER for help. Again, what defense led the NFL in sacks last season? All right, Mike, we'll see if anybody can get that. Let's maybe talk about a little bit of the news of the day before we get out of here. Since we talked last, I should say, Dalvin Cook signed with the New York Jets. What's your whole thoughts on that? You're a New York guy. Tell me the lay of the land now, what you think's going to happen there with the Jets backfield.
I mean, the move just made a lot of sense for the Jets with Breece Hall coming off the injury, and they didn't exactly have a ton of quality depth at the position. So they're obviously an all in to win now with Rodgers at quarterback. So having Cook come in, A, it gives them insurance for the haul, and B, Cook does not look cooked by any means. He still looks pretty good last year for the Vikings. So I think this gives them the opportunity to ease Breece Hall back from his injury. Breece Hall is someone that I am not drafting now in fantasy. Dalvin Cook is probably someone I will also not draft in fantasy. I think they're going to cannibalize the work from each other, especially early on. And if Cook looks good early, I don't see why there's any reason for the Jets. Oh, well, Hall's healthy now, so let's just give him all the work and just take Cook out of the rotation. I think they would share it. I mean, it might be a 65-35 or 60-40 in favor of Hall when he's 100% healthy. But I think best case scenario out of the gate, you're probably looking at 50-50 for at least the first 2 or 3 weeks. And that doesn't make either of them very appealing for fantasy.
I'm the same way. I don't want any of them unless they really fall in the draft. Cook and Hall, I'm just scared. I don't know what's going to happen. They're going to be a nightmare to play on a weekly basis, in my opinion, especially if Hall is active early in the season. It sounds to me like they're going to ease him in, especially those the comments that Hall made. I don't know if you saw those, where he's still kind of unsure of himself when he's cutting. So that doesn't sound great to me when it comes to his condition at all. I'm a little bit worried about that. It's a situation I think I want to avoid unless I'm in a best ball format. I might do it in a best ball format just because the format will pick who's ever going to score the most. But for the most part, I'm just going to stay away from that for sure. So
yeah, I completely agree. I think the best ball for sure would be the only reason I would be interested in either of them would be in a best ball.
Another item of news that not really a surprise, but Anthony Richardson was named the starter for the Indianapolis Colts at quarterback. I think we all saw that coming. I know a lot of people that are super high on him and moving him, a lot of experts moving him way up draft boards. I mean, what's your thoughts on what he can do this year? Where do you think you want to take him in drafts?
I probably won't have him anywhere. I definitely won't be taking him in probably 6-point passing touchdown leagues, maybe in 4. Because of his rushing upside, he's a little bit more valuable in those formats. What I do like is for all of the other players on the Colts, at least now there's no bouncing back and forth. Is Minshew going to be the guy? Maybe he Richardson takes over in the second or third week of the season, and he's just starting to handle with the ones. Then I like this from a perspective. It's early enough in camp. He can build up a good relationship with Michael Pittman, who's obviously the biggest wide receiving threat on that team. So I like this that they made the call early. Again, I probably won't be drafting him anywhere other than a flyer, but I think he's going to shoot up enough because of this announcement that his ADP will be too high for me to take him.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. He's really shooting up draft boards. I think his rushing ability is really helps his weekly floor, and that's exciting from a fantasy perspective. But from a passing perspective, I think he's going to have some issues this year at times with accuracy and just being on the same page with his receivers. He even struggled with that in college a little bit. Now he's moving to the NFL, so I think he could have some issues there. And one thing too that I'm kind of worried about with this is Jonathan Taylor. I was concerned about him before, but now you have a guy that could get a lot of goal line work. And Richardson, he can run the ball, and he's like a fullback back there. He is huge, and so I think he could take some touchdowns away from Taylor if he's on the field. That's a little bit of concern for me as well. So he's another guy going way down the rankings for me at this point. I'm really kind of all out on Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
All right, I think Mike's breaking up a little bit there, unfortunately. Again, we have
Higher than
another trivia question. We just have a couple minutes left in the show. If you know the answer to this, again, who led the NFL in sacks last season? You got a couple minutes left. If you know the answer to this, what defense led the NFL in sacks last season? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said who. I should have said what defense led the NFL in sacks last season. If you know the answer to that, get that in here now. We got a couple minutes left to get that super flex best ball championship entry. Mike, you're back now. Anything you want to add on the Taylor stuff?
Yeah, I was so excited to poo-poo on Jonathan Taylor that my internet just couldn't handle it, and it just completely went out on me. Yeah, no, I don't have him on any of my teams this year, and he will not be on any of my teams that I'm drafting from here up until the start of the season.
Okay, so this weekend, a lot of games again. We have games tonight, a ton on Friday night. Anything you're looking forward to watching at all this weekend? Any players, any situations at all you want to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I don't like how this preseason, this 3 games, nobody wants to play in it anymore. They're not really that and the starters basically don't play at all. And I think we're going to see much of the same this week. So there's not anything that I'm overly excited about, other than I'm just happy to see some guys stay healthy. That's really the only thing I want is just please don't get hurt.
Yeah.
And that's just a PSA to everybody. Also, wait to do your drafts for your home leagues as late as possible, because we're going to get some more injuries over these last 2 weeks of the preseason.
That's very true, Mike. I like to watch your rookies personally because they seem to get more playing time than anybody else. That's the one thing you can watch, see these guys in action, see them running routes, especially the receivers. They seem to get a lot more play than the running backs. They don't want to bang the running backs up too much, but they want to get them some work too. Like, I'd love to see Bijan Robinson out there, see what he can do, just to see him get a couple reps. Hopefully he does this weekend. So that'll be a lot of fun. Someone said they're interested in seeing Javonte Williams too. That's a great point as well. In the chat, I'd like to see how he's doing. Seems like he's on his way back to health. Again, should be a lot of fun though this weekend. Tons of games. Hopefully, we can see something good come out of that. We do not, unfortunately, have a winner for the second trivia question, but we'll keep that entry for next week, Mike, and we'll give it away again. Superflex Best Ball Championship. Don't forget to get in that. Mike, again, really appreciate you joining me on the show today. It's always a lot of fun talking with you and talking about draft position and everything going on in the fantasy world.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. A lot of fun.
Yeah. And you can follow Mike on Twitter. It's Roto Mike, right? Roto Mike Barner. Is that what it is?
You got it. At Roto Mike Barner. I got you covered with everything. So come check it out.
Exactly. He writes for all sorts of different sites. He also writes for us, and he does a baseball column every week, and he'll start on his football one coming up. Again, thanks again for Mike being on the show. Really appreciate it. Getting Buzzed with Howard Bender is on at 1 o'clock, and that's coming up. You want to tune into that. This has been Jeff Paur with Real Time Fantasy Sports. Have a great day, everyone.